Hello, hello. I'm Dan with Graffiti Park. We host our monthly class series where we get to expand our art mediums, professional development skills, all that fun stuff. Today we have a very special guest, and without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. TikiJay.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for making it today. My name's Tiki. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a history on stencils. I'm gonna show you something about the materials, talk to you a little bit about things called bridges and islands, and I will show you some of my stencils that I have, some work and some videos, and then give you a demo on how to make a stencil. So anyway, my name's Tiki. I am a local artist. I've graduated from Otis College of Art and Design, and I have a master's degree from the Academy of Art in San Francisco. I've been making paintings for about 20 years now, and I've also been working commercially in the professional field. But this is something that I've been doing for a long time. I realized that when I was younger, I would make paintings like with a brush. Do you guys make paintings? They take a long time. And then if you sell them, it's not so fun because it's gone now. Yeah, so that's why I got the idea of making stencils, because if I make a stencil piece and I sell it, I won't feel so hurt and I can let it go for a lot less because I could just go ahead and make another one. And then I could also, mass produce pieces that way as well. I'm not spending all these hours on one painting that's going to be gone after a while, but the painters do make money, but I like making stencils. I enjoy them. They're a great medium for if you're a bomber. If you're an urban artist, they're great to go around. I've used them for many years, and they've done a lot of work that I can't really do with my hand. Like, I can paint my tikis, but I can't paint them this big, So that's what I use the stencils for. They're like a tool in my toolbox. So I'm just gonna start off with what is a stencil. And a stencil is basically any kind of material that you cut to create space to put paint through. And so that's just a basic meaning of a stencil. Now, stencils shouldn't be confused with what a template is. This is right here on the right would be what a template is. So if you're speaking about a template, you're speaking about something like this. You might have seen stuff like this for train cars where you can draw, so that would be a template, it wouldn't be a stencil. This would be a stencil here on the left because you can spray paint through it. The templates would be used like the car manufacturers would use these templates to make sure that the doors were the right size, the right shape, but they wouldn't be putting any paint through them. So that's just a simple little difference between the two. These are some of the materials that you could use. This is my go-to. Usually. It's got a nice thick plastic. It's this one here. It's a pretty expensive for 4 sheets, but it's got a nice quality. There's also the pieces that we're gonna be using today. That's the ones on the upper right. Those are up here on my desk. They're really thin, and one of the reasons why I got them is because they're easy to cut, but they're stronger than paper, so that they can go through a little bit more punishment. Like for instance, if you were trying to paint through your paper, the paper would get so wet after a while your stencil would fail. These will actually stick around for a little bit longer. There's also this material called oil board. Oil board is, it's like a cardstock material, but it's a little bit stronger than both of these, I think, in a lot of ways. If you have a laser cutter, something like cardboard, or you could use cardboard also to cut stencils. I use cardboard, I use foam board, but you have to be a little bit more skillful with your knife if you're trying to use those materials. Would you guys like to see some of these materials in real life? Yeah. Let's step outside then really quickly. The first material that I want to talk about is the acetate. So this is the acetate here. Cool thing about acetate is that if it gets too much paint on it, you can peel the paint off and start all over again. So that's the stuff that I showed you in the bag. That's this right here. It's acetate. And you can see I've painted this so many times, and if it gets too much, I just peel it right off. In fact, this is also acetate, and I've done the same thing to this one here. This right here would be the oil board that I was telling you about. Go ahead and feel it. So it's a little stiff. It's a little bit harder to cut, but it's worth the effort because it's got a nice rigidness.
Could you do that in laser cutter too?
You could. In fact, I'm going to be going to do some laser cut stencils. These are all hand cut though, these ones here. You can see how sturdy and firm this is, so if I go ahead and put this up against the wall, it's not going to peel out or collapse or anything like that. These are all plastic. This right here is a cardboard, but this is 3 sheets of cardboard together on one. I laminated this. This is what it looks like. So this would be a single layer stencil, and then the one behind it here, I would paint that a color. Then I would take this one and put it over the top, and then I would have a two-tone stencil like that. This is the latest stencil. If you look in the room there, that's how the stencils start. Nice. You start like that with a piece of paper, and then I go ahead and cut them out, and this one's ready to go right now. This one's made of foam board, and these are all hand cut. Hours. I listen to a lot of podcasts. All of these ones too. But I mean, I make them really small. Like this one here comes in 3 sizes. It comes in a size like that, it comes in a small one. But then I can also take these now and I can make my own slabs. I can make my own posters. I don't have to go get a picture anymore. I'll have to do it by the paper and use this and I'm good to go. Now these materials here would require a laser cutter. I've done this one here in wood. This took even hours with a laser cutter to do. You just give them pretty much a vector file and you can put it together if you understand Illustrator or anything with a vector file or a SVG. This is also in metal, so it really depends on what you're going for. I don't think I've ever made a metal one, and I don't think I'll ever print through this one here. This one here would be just something that I would show as a piece. In fact, I wouldn't even show it like this. I would show it about 2 inches off the back so that the shadow would create the print on the background. Anyway, so there's those materials. These are different types of stencils. There's stencils that the military would use. There's our utility stencils that are here throughout the city. There's hobby stencils, and then of course there's stencils for the urban landscape. And all of these stencils all play a similar role. They're all there to recreate prints very easily and to move on with a standard of color. These are some of the very first stencils ever going back in history. This is called the Cueva de las Manos, the Cave of the Hands. It's in Patagonia, Argentina. These here go back 35,000 years, and it's pretty much a cave where all these hunters used to show up and they would meet up, and that's how they showed that they were there, by blowing paint pigments over their hand and creating these hand prints with their stencils, with their hands as a stencil. The Egyptians also used stencils. They would use leather and papyrus as a material. So they would use leather like I would use foam board. They would use papyrus like I would use foam board. And that's how they made a lot of these markings and artworks for the tombs and sarcophaguses. In fact, they were so good at it that if you went to Pompeii, where the volcano happened, a lot of the artwork that's in places there were done with Egyptian stencils. So it's a practice that goes back in history a long time. The Chinese, of course, use stencils. They use stencils to make prints. They were innovative with it, though. They would put it on fabric. The Chinese and the Japanese were both innovative with using stencils to create fabrics and also books, decoration, so forth and so on. In Europe, stencils were a big deal. The first stencils were to make playing cards. Then they started to use them for the insides of their books, for designs. Then, of course, inside houses, inside of churches, on armor, anything that you needed to recreate the same design for something else. Stencils were big in war, especially in World War II. If we didn't have some of these stencils in World War II, we wouldn't have been able to tell the difference between the enemy and friend. And so a lot of the guys did this, but the US Army used it as a practice anyway. Back then, graphic design was huge. We needed to be able to see our men from far away, so we needed to do things that were really graphically could be seen from far, like our star can be seen from far away, the Japanese red circle can be seen from far away, and all those things were all made by using stencils to apply them to planes, trains, and automobiles, so, especially back in the day. So these are some of the beginning innovators and originators. Even though I got Bleck on the right, Bleck's really the first guy. Bleck's Canadian. He's a stencil artist, and he's still around and he's doing work, but he's not talking right now, and we'll get to that in the next slide. John Fechner was kind of, would see what Bleck was doing and was inspired by Bleck, and he started to go out and make these like political styled stencils that he would put out into the city. Bleck's famous for making a lot of rats. In fact, you might find his work familiar because there's argument that there's a famous artist that stole his work. So, innovator or duplicator? Banksy or biter? In a world where biting is frowned upon, do you still have respect for a biter? Ask yourself, yeah? I mean, because when I look at these works, and I see Black, and then I see Banksy, and I see Black and Banksy, and the rats, especially. I mean, Black's called Black the Rat. So, you know, this is something that I want to bring up because it's a little bit of a controversy, I would say, in the field of stencil art. So I don't know if you know that, but Picasso painted with another man named Braque. And Braque, B-R-A-Q-U-E-S, Braque, he was actually the better painter than Picasso. In fact, he would make paintings and Picasso would go to his house and watch what he was doing. Picasso would go home and make a painting exactly like him and go, this is what I would do. But because Picasso was such a peacock, he got way more famous than Braque did. And I think that the same thing's sort of happening here. But if I seen a silhouette of a tiki head that looked kind of like my tiki head, I would probably call foul, and I don't know. This is just something, I don't know if you guys know who Phantom is. He did the cover for Rage Against the Machine with the guy with his hand up. He's the one that actually sent me this stuff, and we talked about it. He's like, you should bring it up and see what people say. Black was like 60s, 70s. Like, even if you look at the photos, they look really old. You know, those, well, he does, but he won't talk about what's going on right now. I love this man. I'd be all up in that ass. I'd be like, this motherfucker. You know? That's a stone cold giant right there for not speaking, because he doesn't feel like he needs to argue for his work. You know, I think he thinks that history is gonna make the call in the end, and we'll see. I mean, I'm sort of bringing it up just as a discussion matter anyway. So these are some of my works here. These are some of the spots that I've gotten. I don't know if you guys recognize Venice. I had a big truck running around LA for a while. I was doing stencils on denim and other clothing. This was my one-man show, and this was one of the stencils for the pieces in that room there. I used foam board and cardboard because they're just more rigid, and I was able to move them. You wouldn't believe how much nature plays a role when you're out here, like, and just a little gust of wind can take your stencil like it's a sail. And you're like, whee! Why did that break? You know, but.
So, Tiki, do you tape them together then? So you have like multiple pieces of foam?
These are one pieces. Like, this is one piece right here.
Wow.
I might tape different materials together to make that bigger material, but in the end, it's always just one piece. In fact, I have a video I'll show you guys of how I cut a stencil out. If you don't mind, I'll read this to you. This is my approach and philosophy. Stencil art is a way to a means in which the result is the creation of making multiple pieces of the same art in quick succession. Tiki's philosophy or approach to stencil art making is to create stencil artwork that does not appear to be made by a stencil. The end result should be artwork that looks drawn rather than the barrage of bridges in order to keep a stencil intact. The art of stencil making is choosing or creating artwork that should be able to be stabilized and intact for mobility and quick print succession. The urban stencil should be strong enough to withstand the rigors of transport, sticking, and possibly drying to other stencils, yet keeping its integrity. The urban stencil should be able to withstand wind without not folding, bending, or breaking while printing in the urban landscape. In essence, the stencil must be durable, clever in conceptual imagery, cleanly cut, and try to appear as if it's not a stencil at all. So that's my philosophy to cutting stencils and making them. A lot of you guys don't know, I try to hand draw a lot of my stencils. So I start with hand-drawn artwork first, and then I take that artwork and I think about how to make that into a stencil. So for instance, if you see all the lines are all connected, and I had to figure out how to make it so that it would stay intact, like a drawing. This was a piece that was also hand-drawn. Like, I try to do as much hand-drawing as possible. If I have to use a computer, I'm okay with it, but I prefer doing things with a hand. These are all single-layer stencils. So that means that they're designed for just one print. Do you remember when I was showing you my flying tiki and there was 2 of them? So that would be a multi-layer stencil, which we'll look at in just a second. So this is the old motor yard in LA. This is out in the desert. This was a self-portrait series that I was doing. So these would be multi-layer stencils here. So this is a 4-layer stencil. This would be a 4-layer. That's a 5-layer. The ones on the far right are 9-layer stencils. So this is a movie called Behaving Badly. That's Selena Gomez. and Elizabeth's shoe, and that's my painting back there. It's that painting back there. These are some multi-layer ones that I've done throughout the years. This one's gone now. That was on Fremont. I wish it was still there. So this is that one that I was just talking about. As you can see, I started with a sketch, then I present to the client. These pieces here I think were hand-drawn, but it's the green pieces that became the stencil, and it eventually went up there. And I found this online. It was Getty's Images, and there's the piece right there. This is the Cosmopolitan. It's primarily all stencil pieces. They have an urban food court there and did a bunch of walls. They wanted it just to look like some, you know, barrage and collage of just a bunch of different imagery. In fact, some of the stencils that I did for here are some of the artworks I brought for you guys to start out with. Okay, so these are 4 sheets of foam board, 8 foot by 4 foot, and I taped them all together, both sides, so that they wouldn't fold, so that they would have the integrity of one piece. I printed out each one of those on a 8.5 by sheet 11, and then put them together. Inside of Illustrator, you can tile your image to a bigger image and it'll put them all down, and so that's how I was able to do that. So I had to cut this whole thing on the floor. There was no other way I could do this. I couldn't put it up against any wall, anything, but that's how it's done. I put the artwork on top and then I just cut right through it for hours until it's done. And you get a pretty nice print in the end. So this is printing it. It's a little more chilled out than the cutting. So I had to cut the stencil because it wouldn't fit in there. It wouldn't fit in my space. But, you know, and not only did I have to do it once, but I had to flip it over and do it twice, actually. So I had to use the other side of the stencil so that they would mirror each other. So that's also another reason why I use this foam board. And to tell you what, after I was done with this, that stencil was done. It broke apart. So it gave me just enough as what I needed. Those blades right there, if you try to use a bigger knife, that's like, think of it as if you were a doctor. It's like using a butcher knife when you should be using a scalpel. So in these knives here, these are perfect. They're perfect, perfect, perfect. They're like a scalpel that you need. One of the important things about stencils is cutting bridges. So if you guys make artwork, like for instance, some of these pieces that I have out here aren't ready. Like this one here, the crown, it's definitely not ready. If you tried to cut that out as a stencil, it would fall through. And it's because it doesn't have any bridges. So for this one here, just give me a second. Wherever you see me do 2 slash lines, that's where I would probably put a bridge for this. So do you see how there's 2 slash lines? That would be the bridge that I would put in there so that this would stay together as one piece. I think my Tiki is good to go. I think the post-snow bills might be good to go. The happy faces are good to go. But you might have to inspect the artwork to make sure that they have the bridges. Like this one here is ready to go. I brought this one. It would be really difficult to do the 3D, but I thought that if someone wanted to do the big letters, then that could still kind of work out for itself. So I start with the drawing, and then I look at the corners and I look for the places that I feel like it's going to fall apart. Now there's no real way to explain to you how it's going to fall apart. You kind of got to get a feel for it. The best way I can explain to you very abstractly is if we were going to try to cut this circle out without the bridges, what would happen? Yeah, you would lose the outline. So that's the reason the bridges are there, so that you can keep that outline in the place. And I don't know if you noticed where my bridges were, I just used my free hand to go ahead and fill in those spaces. But you know, you don't have to. Sometimes bridges are cool. Like I love them sometimes, and sometimes it's not what I'm going for. And then on the next image, you could see I actually put them in. And then this right here represents the paper that you would put on top of your stencil material, and then you would go ahead and start cutting. So I know that we know what bridges are. Can you guys figure out what I would call an island? So everything black on here would be an island. So my island would be this massive piece here, just the mouth, just the nose, and those would be the islands. So it's islands and bridges is what you're looking for. This would just be a single layer stencil here. So whatever the background would I be painted on, that would be the color of the background. And then the black would be the print, actually. I hope that made sense. Like, it takes a little bit of practice. Like if you guys brought your artwork to me and you had work, I would kind of show you and then you could help figure it out. That's why I was trying to say, if we start with an abstract shape like a circle, you understand that if you cut out the outside, there's no inside. And so that's why the bridges are important, so that you can maintain the integrity of the other piece. All right, so thank you for your time. That's it. That's what I got. All right.